Hello, and welcome to this week's episode of the Elevate Your Running podcast. My name is Sarah, Coach Sarah, and this is episode 126, which is wild. It's incredible. 126 episodes in, and I feel like we're just getting started. So, over the weekend, I've had a lot of questions come up around heat training, running in the summer, what that should look like, what it should feel like. And I thought it'd be a great part two episode from last week's episode, which was all about spring energy gels and what to do if you have been using those gels, and some new gels that are popping up on my radar now that I'm transitioning gels, no longer using spring energy gels for primarily racing, but also training. And this is the part two episode that kind of goes in tandem with that episode. And this episode is all about strategies on how to fuel your way through summer training without compromising your training, which is going to be amazing. Now, if you're looking to get maybe a basic 101 episode on heat training and some best practices around how to train and run in the summer, that is going to be episode 80, which is called How to Adapt to the Heat, Make the Most of Summer Training. So with that, I want to kick this week's episode off with an elevated moment. And this is Monday. I'm recording this quote unquote live. This is like the week the episode's coming out, which is really exciting. And most episodes are like that. Not every episode is like that, especially if I have guests. It all kind of depends on their schedule and what they can do. And more times than not, a lot of those episodes are scheduled in advance. So, this is a quote unquote live episode, and which that is something I can do. It could be something that the future Elevate Your Running podcast episodes shake out to be, like live episodes where people can chime in, ask live questions, etc. But I just came off of an hour-long program. This is going to be an 8-week intensive program for run coaches, getting to the heart of why we coach and how we can become better coaches for the athletes that we coach. And I'm really excited about this. I brought on Dr. Laura Pence about a month ago, maybe a month and a half ago, on the podcast to talk all about how to have that resilient mindset after training really hard. Maybe you're going through a 12-week, 16-week training cycle and you run your A goal race. Now what? How do you stay focused? How do you stay in it? How do you continue to train? What are some of like the normal signs, normal things that happen in our mind and our body, more so in our mind, because she is a clinical psychologist, after we race something big like that? I think that was the first episode that came out in the month of May. So you want to look back on that one. It was an incredible episode. There's so many good nuggets and tidbits in that episode. And part of what I was weaving in and out of that episode was, the quality of like a good coach. I think a lot of us know that coaches and people who've been running a long time can write training plans, but there is this whole other human element, this human side to running. And that's where Dr. Laura comes into play. She has these, she calls them like a coaches collective. It's like a cohort of coaches who meet twice a week for 8 weeks. Mondays, we have our lesson. Thursdays, we get to collab as a team. There is homework, which I knew going into it. I asked all the right questions. But we had our first class today, and it was so much fun. It was just great to sit back, to learn, shake my head, yes, take notes. I definitely have a lot of homework to do tonight, but I'm excited because it's not only going to help me learn more about myself and maybe how my coaching has transitioned from 3 years ago when I really got into it, I guess 4 years ago, how it's shifted, how it's transformed, how it's elevated, and then also like where I want to continue to take it. So that's really exciting. And it's one of like the driving forces that got me to sign up for this, because it's not cheap to do this. It's a really big monetary investment, is the community aspect. And I thought that that's one, so cool. And also it's like one of the biggest things that I promote with all of it is like the community aspect. And a lot of people join the team for that aspect. So I'm really excited to be able to connect with other run coaches, to connect with people throughout the day. That's not just through Final Search typing, and get an opportunity to not only discover more about myself as a human, more about myself as a coach, but then also help other coaches learn from them. They can learn from me, and then spread all that goodness to everyone that I coach. And I'm assuming there's going to be a lot of things seeping through social media, and of course through like my monthly team calls and worksheets and different activities I'm going through with athletes one-on-one to discover more about them, learn more about them. So I think it's going to be such a huge up level, and I'm just so excited about it. The last time I did something like this was during the pandemic. It started in like late fall, early winter of 2020. It was all over Zoom. It was this like emotional intelligence course. It was like 5 months long. We had 5 very intense weekends where we would be on Zoom anywhere from Thursday morning to Sunday night, getting about 9 hours to sleep, and that was it. And we were on Zoom for like the rest of the time, and there was just a lot of roles, a lot of things going on, but it was also all there to support us to become our best selves and to learn more about ourselves. And out of that program came a lot of what you see today with Elevate. So it's really cool to kind of be back in, quote unquote, the container is what we called it back then, but to be in this group of, it's all women, which is also really cool, like a group of all women supporting each other, learning more about myself. And I just love that. I love being in that place of growing, learning, showing up, wanting to do more, do better. And I don't know if that's because I'm a Scorpio and because we really like to transform and change. I've always been this way of like, I'll build something, I'll do something. And then once I feel like it's at maybe a place I can no longer take it, or it's just kind of like holding steady, right? I'm like, okay, what's next? How can we change this again? How can we up level this? And then of course that goes with myself as well as a human. So, at any rate, I'm very excited to be part of this program. I think it's going to be so cool. I think I had a smile on my face the entire hour. And, um, and I think like one quick reflection piece on it was she gave us the opportunity to turn our camera off. We could mute ourselves and just like, be in class that way. And I thought, oh, cool. I can turn my screen off. I love that. And I actually do really love that. And I think it goes back to that 4 years ago, being on those Zoom calls for 12, 14 hours a day. It was like very, very draining, and we couldn't turn our screens off. And I thought, no, keep your screen on, stay engaged. I think it's a very slippery slope when the screen is turned off. You can start dabbling on email, getting on your phone, whatever. And I was like, no, just pay attention. So it was super great. It was a great hour to be focused, dialed, super excited. And I know that excitement is only going to transfer to the athletes, to the Elevate team, to the in-person team, to the podcast, all that stuff. So it's really, really exciting. And I'm happy that you're here with me today. So let's get into it. So this is going to be part 2 of the episode from last week, which was all about the spring energy fiasco, that drama around the gels being 2/3 less of the calories and carbohydrates and basically the substance within that gel that spring was promoting, which is highly, highly disappointing. And I was talking to a group of team members that I coach on Saturday after their long run. I had a workout, so I couldn't meet them, but I ended up meeting up with them after. their run for coffee and food and stuff like that. And I was talking to them about it, about how it gets to be this like, you can honor your feelings with it. If you are someone who has practiced with spring energy gels, maybe in your training on race day, and you're like, wow, that is such a bummer, right? Such a bummer that we've been fueling with this gel that, really hasn't been helping us at all with our performance. And maybe you've been really close to BQing, or maybe you just got right over that BQ mark or that 4-hour mark or having that breakthrough race, but you weren't quite there. And it can be very, very frustrating, right? I get it. And what I was sharing with the team on Saturday was like, we get to honor those feelings 100%. And we also get to flow into the excitement of the potential of what's to come. And that's really where I want the energy to be placed, because there's nothing that we can do about the past, right? If I had known that those gels were bogus, I wouldn't have promoted them. I would not have trained with them and raced 5 marathons, and they were all travel races, everyone, like thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars spent on these races. I keep track of that, how much I'm spending on travel races, and like some people know what I spend. You don't want to know. Maybe you do. I don't know. Some people put reels together of like, this is what I spent on my Boston Marathon weekend. I think it's I don't know. I just don't like to share that kind of side of things, because I don't know what purpose serves for that, but maybe entertainment. But I think it's really important to kind of shift into like, well, cool. If I was able to run a BQ, or, you know, a certain time in a race, and I wasn't fueling myself well, awesome. What do you think is going to happen when you go into your fall race, right? There's going to be so much growth, so much improvement. I was on a run over the weekend, and I was really paying attention to my heart rate. Maybe it was my double. I had a double on Friday, which was wild. I don't think I've ever had a double on Friday. I don't know if it was supposed to be there or not, but I rolled with it. And it was 3 miles, which was fine. I had 8 in the morning, very common. If you follow my training, 8 is a very standard number for me. And I went into this 3-mile run, and I was like, just don't even pay attention to pace. Just keep your screen on the heart rate. I was wearing my heart rate monitor, and just make sure your heart rate is staying in, like, I really like low zone 2. I don't really like my heart rate on easy runs to get into high zone 2, because like, you really want to lean into like zone 2, but also like lower zone 2 is better than higher zone 2 in my opinion. So I really do like to shuffle out there. Um and I noticed every time on my run, and this was also happening on Saturday, um or on Sunday on my long run. Every time I was thinking about like my fall marathon, and like running the way I think I'm going to run, and like how I'm going to close out that last 10K, my heart rate would spike. I was like so excited. And here I am, I'm like shuffling, and shuffling for me in the heat is like, what was I running? I was running about 4 minutes slower than my 5K race pace that I raced in the fall of October. I think it was October last year at the Chicago 5K race for Chicago Marathon weekend. 4 minutes slower. My heart rate is spiking up into zone 3 as I'm like thinking about my fall race, right? So I think like that's the energy I want. I'd love for everyone to have and to really embrace, and think about like all the good that you can create this fall with proper fueling. So one, we get to test out a bunch of different gels. I know last week I didn't talk about Huma gels. I'm not a fan of, I think all Huma gels have fiber in them. I'm not a fan of taking fiber while I'm running, since I have a sensitive stomach. I'm just going to leave it at that. But Huma is a great gel. I know a lot of people use it. A lot of people love it. It's another great one to try. I do not have any nutrition specs on that one, so you'll have to like Google that for yourself. But the other aspect of showing up strong in a fall race is how your summer training goes, right? Like you want to be able to fuel your way through summer and run your summer training, or run through summer, train through summer without compromising the workouts, the long runs, how you're feeling, how you're showing up, right? And oftentimes the heat can just zap us and we can feel really tired and lethargic and unwilling to and unable to run fast because maybe our heart rate's really high because we're warm and we're sweating a lot and all these things happen, right? It's all normal, but we can still make so much progress in the summer. We just don't really notice it. You might notice it on like a cooler day, but it's not going to be into the fall when you go into like your first long run of the fall or your first workout for the fall. And you're like, oh, wow, I feel incredible. I feel so good. That's kind of like the light at the end of the tunnel during all these summer training sessions, the hot workouts, the hot long runs. Just keep that in mind as you go through the fall and taper down to run your breakthrough fall race. If you've been using spring energy gels, if you haven't been using spring energy gels, this still applies to you. So let's first and foremost talk about the heat. So one of the reasons why fueling is such a huge aspect in the summer is that we actually burn more muscle glycogen in the summer when it's warmer. So when the temperatures are greater, we are going to burn more. So I think this is really relevant because if you've been using spring energy and in the summer, oh my gosh, what a disaster, right? You probably felt like crap and you were just like thinking about all these other things that were going on. No, it was probably your fuel cells or your fueling because the glycogen is what we need to be able to run fast, right? Run strong, have those really fueled carbohydrated muscles to be able to go out and just crush. So, especially if you're not used to working out in warmer climates, this burn rate's going to be higher. So as we're acclimating to summer heat, you need to take in more as you're going through long runs. And let's say you start in the morning, early morning, but by the time you get to the end of your long run, it's like 20 degrees warmer than it was when you started. You're going to be burning through more and you're going to need more. So that makes sense, right? Maybe you're moving to a warmer climate. I have one athlete I'm thinking of specifically. She moved to a warmer climate and then her running just like fell apart, right? I bet fueling was part of that. I think acclimating to a very warm climate in the summer is also part of that, right? So, based on the study by the Journal of the Applied Physiology, Nutrition, and Metabolism, this study actually shows that a higher proportion of our carbs is burned in warm weather. So when our bodies are acclimating to the heat, we just need more. So we could be in that time period of where we actually need to be eating more while we're running. Now, you can go to natural food sources. I think that's realistic. You can carry more gels. I know I'm trying to like double up the spring energies to get rid of them. And I'm like, oh, wow, this is really hard on the long run because they're already so big. And now I'm doubling them up. And I don't know how many I can carry. Like, this is really tough. But this is part of the reason why we might not feel as great in the warmer weather because we just need more and we're not giving our body what it needs, but we don't understand maybe what it's telling us, right? So we need to elevate our hydration and our nutrition intake in the summer months. Now, when acclimation happens, you'll feel it, right? Adaptations to the heat and the humidity can take anywhere. I saw from a very reputable source 3 to 14 days. I feel like it's more like 10 to 14 days. I don't know anyone who can like acclimate to heat and humidity in 3 days, but hey, if you've done it, I'd love to know. And maybe this person has. And she's a registered dietitian. She's very smart. She's an awesome runner. And maybe she has acclimated in 3 days, but you typically want it to, happen over the course of 2 weeks. Those 2 weeks are not going to be fun. And actually, it's going to be more like a consistent 14 days. So if you're running in like the heat one day and then you get like a cold front coming through for a few days and then it's warm again and then there's a cold front, or maybe you're running inside, or maybe you stopped running, like that doesn't count. You have to like reset. It does count. It counts for a lot of things, but it doesn't count for adaptations. You have to reset the button, and that's when your 14-day window kind of starts over again. So last summer, after I raced a 5K in July in Denver, I felt like throwing up at the end of the race, and I ran my half marathon pace. And that happens a lot in Denver for 5Ks. Like 5K speed at altitude is interesting. It's like sometimes it's there, some more times for me it's not there. And it's just like a matter of like how I feel on race day at 52,000 or 5,200 feet above sea level, or 53 or 54, depending on where I'm racing. And this particular day, it was warm. We were like already warm in the warm up, and I ran half marathon pace, felt like throwing up at the end of the race. And my coach that day on like training peaks, it was over a weekend, she was like, okay, you need to start training in the heat, and you need to do it for 2 weeks straight, 10, 11, 12 o'clock in the morning. Like I have a flexible schedule, so I can do that. I don't like to do it. I've been running in the morning. I've been falling back into old patterns, everyone. I'm running in the morning, like after I wake up, have coffee, kind of do a few things around either my house or a few things on the computer, which I don't love. And then going out for a run. It's nice to just start with the run and then start work, rather than having work kind of seep into like 24/7 of my life. It's one of the things I'm working on personally. So I love getting out and going, before I start my day with Elevate. And but last summer I was going out. I was like working for however many hours and then going out for a run, coming back and continuing to work until I felt like I was done for the day. And, it wasn't as bad as I thought it was going to be. And it worked. And I felt really great in the fall. And I felt really strong. My heart rate was a lot lower in the fall. Like it really, really did work. And it's something that I should lean into this summer. We'll see. Because I think a lot of like what I need as a human is going to be overriding maybe some like heat adaptations in the summer. But maybe that's why I have these doubles kind of creeping in. I don't know. But here are some strategies that can help you adjust maybe a little bit quicker to the summer heat without having to compromise your training. So hydration is going to play a huge role in adaptation and feeling better while running in the heat, and feeling better just throughout the week. I noticed I bumped up my hydration tenfold last week, started taking an element every single day, if not an element and a half. And I felt so strong during my workout and long run last week. So strong. Like I ran PR times in the 800 and felt really good about it. My body wasn't trashed. So I know hydration is such a huge role, and sodium levels. They play a key role in maintaining your balance of fluid in your body. And there's also an abundance of research that shows that losing sodium equals losing fluid. And even just a 1% to 2% dehydration can cause performance decreases. Okay. Now, this is usually super impossible to avoid altogether when you're running a marathon, but there is a way to kind of like limit the damage, so to speak. And that's always something I think about because I sweat a lot. And I think and know for the marathon distance in particular, like in those later miles, I am drinking like a camel. It is so wild, which tells me I'm not drinking enough in the first 10K, which is absolutely true. And like if you're dehydrated, it's not something you can fix on the course. Like, yes, you can take in more water, but that's not really fixing the dehydration issue, right? Like if you're bonking in a race from fueling, sometimes taking in more fuel can help you find a stronger pace at the end, right? So now everyone's going to vary in the amount of fluid that you do lose when you run. And this is going to be true for the sodium concentrations too, because the sodium concentrations in your sweat is very different from human to human, runner to runner. So our blood volume is actually slowly reducing as we sweat. So as we sweat, our blood volume is lowering. Our sodium intake is low, or not our intake, but our sodium levels are also decreasing. And this is like not creating a strong runner. So if you've ever run, maybe it's a long run. I think that's a great example for summer running. Or maybe it's like a hour long run and it's in the heat or whatever. If you're noticing your paces are feeling harder and harder and harder by the end of the run, this is probably the reason why. As long as you know that I've run these paces before or I've run these distances before, you're not brand new to running and you're like, oh, wow, this is my first 10-mile long run ever. That's a little bit different. But if you're like, wow, I've been running 10 miles is like, a distance I've run quite a bit. I'm familiar with it. My body's familiar with it. And I'm still feeling like crap at the end of it. It's probably just due to this. So when our blood volume lowers, it improves the strain on our cardiovascular system. And then we have the symptoms like the fatigue. We start feeling tired. We can't hold pace. Pace feels a lot harder. We're stopping because we need to catch our breath. All of that starts to happen when we get fatigued and when we sweat too much and we're not replacing our sodium levels. And this can be very dangerous. Now, check in with your body. Are you feeling sluggish? Are you feeling tired? It could totally be in an electrolyte imbalance. And maybe, have you gone out for a run and it felt awful most of the time? Could be the electrolyte imbalance for sure. But now let's layer on the heat. So now you're going out in the summer, you're feeling sluggish, you're feeling tired, you're losing electrolytes because you're sweating. Now it's like not just like 60-degree sweating, you're like in 80-degree weather sweating, which in my opinion is different. At least for me, if you've seen me run in person, you know what I'm talking about. So how do we add in those electrolytes? So we feel really strong when we're running. So we want to incorporate salty foods into our diet. And sports nutrition products are also great for this. I'm thinking, like those Gatorades, and I think Element makes a drink now too. They can kind of augment the electrolyte losses, which is great. Salty foods in general are going to help so much. I often hear runners talk about like, but I'm eating a lot of fresh foods and, quote unquote, healthy foods. And it's like, that's great, right? But you're not getting the sodium intake that you need to be able to run strong and to run the way that you want to run if you're not also supplementing it with like a liquid IV or an LMNT or something like that. So you have to consume a little bit more overall as an athlete, but then in particular, even more in the summer months. So salty foods can look like pickles, pretzels, crackers. They're really great. Packaged foods are going to have more sodium. Adding salt to your food, that helps. This stuff is all free, right? Like salt, just add salt to your food. And that helps so much. But then you can also, add those those sports drinks too. Like I mentioned, coconut water is another great one. Liquid IV, Scratch Hydration, who now has an everyday hydration, so it doesn't contain the sugar that like their like athlete movement hydration contains, which I think is really cool if you're consuming, a few servings a day. And they have some really fun flavors. So I definitely check that out. So how much to consume? So this is a great question. How much do you consume of sodium and fluid intake during the summer months? So total fluid throughout the day before sweat loss, right? So if you're just sitting at your computer recording a podcast all day long, that would be a long podcast. You want to consume 50% of your body weight in ounces of fluid. So if you weigh 150 pounds, that's 75 ounces of fluid. But when I was working with a sports dietitian, she often talked to me like about like living at altitude is going to be different. Living in a warm weather environment is different. I had an athlete friend who lives in San Francisco. He came out for the Boulder. Shout out to Ronald, and ran the Boulder 10K. He did a bunch of other things too. So this was not just like, he didn't just come to Colorado to run a 10K at altitude, and a hilly 10K at that. But we had a coaching call the week after he got back to San Francisco. One of the things that he mentioned on the call was just like how much more fluid and water he needed, because he's like, it's just so wild. He mentioned something about like the altitude and having a dry mouth, something to that effect of just like always needing water. And it's so true. So if you live in a warm, humid weather, environment, or you live at altitude, I suggest 100 ounces or more, depending on how much you sweat throughout the day. I personally need over 100 ounces of water. I also personally need more than one elementi back in a day, which is, it's ridiculous, but it does work. I notice the change. So, and that's a really cool thing to do. Now, the next step is to measure your sweat loss, right? So, there are sweat loss calculators on sports dietitian Kelsey's website, which her sports dietitian coaching website is Meteor. So, the Meteor website, or Megan Featherston also has a calculator on her website. She has a bunch of really good tools. I think she just released something today about how to measure this too. I saw something on Instagram. So the way that I did it was I weighed myself before and after I went out for a 16-minute run, and I didn't have any fluids during that run. It was a very difficult run for me. I was in the summer, I always carry a handheld, and I usually drink all of it, even on like my 8-mile runs or whatever. So I think for this run, I probably had like 6.5 miles for the day or something. So weighed myself before, went out and ran 60 minutes in the heat, kind of mid-morning-ish. It wasn't like the heat, like the peak heat of the day, but it wasn't like 5 a.m. either. Didn't consume any fluids, and then I weighed myself. So for every 32 ounces of fluids loss, which is going to be 2 pounds on the scale, you want to replace with 300 to 500 grams of sodium. So this is a good way to figure out, all right, if I'm running a warm and hot and humid race, I need to figure out how much I'm losing. And you can do that on a 60-minute run. How many pounds did you lose? And then take into account, let's say you lost 4 pounds. Great example. You might need, that would be 1,000 grams of sodium, right? 600 to 1,000 grams of sodium consuming while you're running. I would take into account, if you are running the 26.2, you might need a little bit more. Salt tabs are great too. I know a lot of people take salt tabs. I was burned by salt tabs. I know if Judy's listening to this, she's going to get a kick out of it. There was a lot going on during this time period, so I don't know if I shared this story with her, but she ran the Boston Marathon, and after Boston, she was, I think, disappointed. A lot of people were disappointed with how warm it was and just how hot it felt, because no one was heat acclimated. And so it just felt a lot harder than probably what the temperature suggested. Plus, it's Boston Marathon course, and the course is ridiculous. And she's like, "Oh, Sarah, I was so upset. Like, my salt tabs disintegrated in my pocket when I was running." And so like she only got a certain point into the race with salt tabs, and then she didn't have any more, and they were gone. And I remember that happened to me. The only time I've used salt tabs is in the 2021 Boston Marathon. Judy, the exact same thing happened to me. Salt tabs in the pocket equals no bueno. If you're taking salt tabs in a marathon, it's probably because it's warm. And if it's warm, that means you're sweating. And if the salt tabs are in your pocket and not, I don't even know, I guess if they're free flowing, which is how they were in my pocket, I'm assuming they were in Judy's, they will disintegrate by the sweat that is on your race kit. This is a fact. I have a photo of my half disintegrated salt tabs on the table of this like Mexican restaurant my sister Tiffany and I went to after Celebrate with a Margarita. And I was like, these didn't work, right? Because it's like they disintegrated in the pocket. You have like the salt, like ramifications of like the melting like all over your shorts. It was wild. So anyways, if you're taking salt tabs with you, put them in like a plastic baggie or something because they will disintegrate. But that's a great way to get an extra sodium. And at the Scratch no longer makes this product, but the hyperhydration, it was such a good hyperhydration product to take. I took it in the summer of 2022 practicing for the Chicago Marathon, and it was also what I used during the Chicago Marathon. And so I know sodium is such a big piece to my performance and how well I race. It's also the race that I have my PR in. It's the race that I negative split, ran a very, very strong last half marathon. And it was also the race that I didn't use spring energy gels. So look at that. So hopefully that guide helps you. Head over to Megan Featherston's website or sports dietitian Kelsey's website for more information on how to calculate your specific needs and what you need to do in the summer to show up feeling strong and happy. So let's transition to carbs and gels. So prior to acclimating to the heat, your heart rate's also going to be higher. So that's going to be normal, which also means we get to slow down. And this also means if our heart rate's higher and it's warmer, we're utilizing a greater percent of our carbohydrates, like I talked about at the beginning of the podcast. So you want to also focus on eating and consuming more carbohydrates in the summer with your meals and snacks that can improve your performance. It can also improve your recovery. Yes. And make training more fun. Because if you feel good when you're running, it's guaranteed more fun than when you feel like crap, right? When you feel like crap, you're like, I just want this run to be over and I want to forget it and I want tomorrow to feel good. I've been there. So when our bodies are acclimating to the heat, we just need more. So it's going to be more hydration, more sodium, and also more carbohydrates. So if we don't give our bodies what we need, we are going to find that fatigue. So you got to like look at your running and look at the temperatures, look at your salt intake, look at your hydration intake, look at your carbohydrate intake, and think and really like dive into like where can I up level? Because if you are still feeling fatigued at the end of long runs, it's going to be in one of those categories that needs an up level. And like, I remember when I first started working with Scratch and I was talking to their registered dietitian and kind of talking through my long runs, and they're like, oh, have you tried this product? They unfortunately don't make hyperhydration anymore. I have 3 sleeves of it that I'm saving. I'm going to use 2 in training, probably in August when I start marathon training. And then I'm going to save the last one for marathon day. And then who knows what's going to happen? Maybe some really fun magic. Who knows? But having an up level to my sodium changed everything. And I was clueless. I had no idea. I was like, well, I thought I was drinking enough. And so if you tell yourself, if you're like shaking your head to this and you're like, yeah, I think I'm eating enough. I think I'm drinking enough. I think I'm getting enough sodium. I bet you're not because I wasn't. And that's how it always works. So just try a little bit more. And maybe it's in all 3 categories and just see what happens. What's really cool with this is that you notice it immediately. Immediately. Like I started taking an LMNT packet and a half a day starting last Monday. And on Wednesday, I was like flying around the track like it wasn't 70 degrees and warm. Like I was feeling really strong and really good. And I was like, oh wow, this works, right? It's another example of it working. So you also want to, the next strategy is to experiment, right? Try it, try new gels, try more water, try more electrolytes, try new things. Try new things. I know it's so hard to break out of what we typically do. It's so hard to break out of our routine and to think like, oh my gosh, it could be one more thing to add to the list. Correct. It is one more thing to add to the list of life, but also if you're able to show up feeling stronger and happier and you're recovering faster, that's worth it, right? Because then you're able to do more things throughout the day. And maybe it's like one more thing to add to your list, but you're taking more things off because you have more energy, you're recovering faster, you're sleeping better, all those little trickle effects, right? Now is the time to experiment, especially if you're running the Chicago Marathon or anything after, I would say October 1st and after. If you're running Berlin or a race in September, you're probably already in training. And training is also a great time to experiment, but you got to be okay if like something doesn't happen the way that you want it to happen on a training run, which I know for me is a very like hard pill to swallow. Like if I have a big training run on the agenda, I'm not experimenting that day because I know my coach does not want to hear it. Like, I have got to show up and like execute. And I think if you have like an easy run, if you're pretty confident with a workout, like I had a workout on Saturday, I went into it, I was like, this feels like something I should crush. Let's hope that I crush it. One of those types of workouts, great day to experiment because even if it's going a little bit sideways, if the workout is like, if you're so confident in the workout, you should still be able to flow through it and be like, oh, I check marked that. Great. I experimented, check mark. And I found something that didn't work. Great. Now I know I can't use that. Right. So I think now is a great time to really try all the things. The feed, I know I mentioned this last week, thefeed.com. What I love so much about them is that you can order one item of things. You don't have to order a dozen gels. You can order one gel and try a bunch of different things and just see what happens. I suggest ordering two of everything because if you're out on a run, maybe you want to try the same gel back to back to see how that stacks in your stomach rather than all these like random gels. And then you're like, well, my stomach hurt. Well, you don't know which one made it hurt because if it started hurting at gel 3, it could have actually been gel 1. But you don't know that because it took time for gel 1 to like kick in, or maybe it was a combination of gel 1 and gel 2. But if you're using the same gel on the run, then you kind of have a better data pool to pull from to say like, oh yeah, it was this gel that made my stomach hurt, right? So you can also do liquid calories too on your runs. I think that's a great idea too. The Scratch high carb drink mix is awesome. I personally don't want to, I don't know. I think like I haven't experimented with that. I don't think I will. I know some people like the Morton high carb mixes when they're racing. Scratch has one as well. You know, if you feel comfortable drinking a lot of fluids and a lot of liquids during a race or during a training run, um, great, go for it. I personally am not going down that road because I feel like I already stop enough, like in the first half of my run, um, to go to the bathroom and like, you know, just too much stopping that I don't want to have to like stop to go to the bathroom even more if I'm drinking not only my water and electrolytes, but also the high carb mix, which I know also has electrolytes in it, but you know, got to balance it out. So, strategy number 4 is to keep it simple and keep it cold, right? So, this is going to be your post run and workout fueling so you can show up and not have any compromise in your training. Because if you're keeping it simple and you're keeping it cold after you work out, after that long run, let's picture that long run end of June, July, no shade. You're just summer sun is beating down on you. You just finished your longest long run and you're thinking, wow, I have zero appetite and I just want something cold. In my case, it's going to be an iced coffee. Like I dream about it on my long runs of like, just get through whatever. I know some people like shower shakes, which is where I'm transitioning to. And, you know, other people like adult beverages. To each their own, right? You want to keep it simple. You want to keep it cold. So, getting in as much as possible, as quickly as possible, is key to recovering from that run, being able to feel better for the rest of the day, being able to feel better on your run the following day, and continuing that domino effect, right? Because we want to feel as good as possible in training. Now, it's not going to be like that every day. And there's definitely going to be days and times in our training cycle where the fatigue is going to take over, But I think fatigue and feeling crappy are two different things. I have felt fatigue on runs, on recovery runs, day after a big, like long run. And I've also felt crappy on runs. And I think that's two very different feelings, right? So you want to feel maybe a little fatigue as you go through the training cycle. More fatigue, the better, because you want to fatigue your body, taper down, feel strong like beast mode on race day. But the faster you can recover when you feel your body. So you want to consume a 3-to-1 carbs to protein ratio. So 3 times the amount of carbs to 1 serving of protein. So I look at it in like a 20-gram spectrum. 20 grams of protein equals 60 grams of carbohydrates. So if you come through and finish like a long run in the heat or a workout, or maybe it's your just training run, it's at night, maybe it's in the morning, whenever it is, keeping it simple, keeping it cold. You want to get something in your body. Something is better than nothing. So protein smoothie with toast is awesome. Greek yogurt with berries and granola, awesome. Toast with cottage cheese and fruit, awesome. I know cottage cheese is making a comeback. I've always loved it, but it is now harder to find in the grocery store. Maybe I have TikTok to thank to that. I don't know, but I'm just glad everyone's getting their protein. Cold pizza, warm pizza, whatever, and salad, probably cold pizza after a long run, right? So the faster you can recover in training, the better you're going to feel throughout the training cycle. And really, like, the more you're going to be able to do. So if you're working with a coach and they're seeing that you're recovering faster, you feel really good, you're leaving comments like, my legs feel really good, my mind's feeling good, like all these things, those are green flags. Those are green lights for us to like give you more. And in that balance of like, more isn't always better, right? But more sometimes is better. And you can get a little bit more out of training, which is going to help you on race day. So if you can recover faster, you can get more. So last fall, I had this iconic long run. I don't know if it was iconic at all. It was a 25-mile long run, and I had a 5-mile warm up, and then I had 20 miles at moderate pace. So moderate pace for me is 10 to 15 seconds slower than marathon pace. And I thought, ooh, cool. I'm so excited for this run. This is going to fly by. It's going to feel great. And that was not the case, by the way. It was a very, very tough run, and it was designed to be tough. I was just very naive going into it, maybe more confident than I should have been. But at any rate, I asked my coach at the end of the cycle when we were kind of recapping CIM, it's like why I got that, because, 25 miles is very long. Most people don't need to do anything over 20 and still run a very strong PR worthy marathon, right? And I'm like, why? Like, why give me that extra stress? Like, all these things. I just run Indy the week before, put it into context, ran a huge breakthrough half marathon, recovered that whole week with just very, very slow, easy running. And she's like, it's simple. You were recovering after every single long run. And I knew this was the cycle that you could handle that long run. And I was like, oh my God, you're right. I was recovering really well, because that doesn't happen in every training cycle, right? If you've stacked training cycles, or if you run through more than one training cycle, every training cycle is different, right? And it's so interesting how one cycle can be so strong and you can recover so well and you get like all of these runs. I also got this 15K tempo that actually stayed on my calendar. And I told her that I was so excited to finally get the 15K tempo at marathon pace, because it was a workout that I always had bookmarked. It was always bookmarked like 4 weeks out from the goal race. So for before Chicago and before Boston, and both times it got pulled and I never got to do it. And I said, when I saw it bookmarked on my calendar, I was like, every now and again, I'll have, what I mean by bookmarked is that I'll have a workout, like I get a week at a time. And I usually get that week at a time about 8 hours before the next week starts, right? Like on a Sunday, late afternoon, I'm getting my schedule for Monday through Sunday. which is fine. That works for me. I have a flexible work schedule. I know basically what I'm getting into most weeks. It's just a matter of like, where do I need to go to run my long run and how much time do I need to buffer for the Wednesday morning workout? So there every now and again there'll be like a workout kind of like down the road on the calendar that she has bookmarked for me or bookmarked to like do. And so it'll just be there randomly floating on a day, like 4 weeks out from the race. And it got pulled for the Chicago training, which was fine. I had COVID. There's no way. I think a 10K at marathon pace was like too much. And then it got pulled for Boston because I was like not recovering well or like peaked out too early. Like there's a lot going on for that cycle too. Not every training cycle is perfect, everyone. And going into CIM, I saw it bookmarked and I'm like, yes, this is the cycle I get to do this thing. And I got to do it. And I was so jazzed. It gave me so much confidence going into that race. And I was just so excited to be able to run a 10-mile marathon tempo at altitude that I absolutely crushed and felt great at. And it was also like, it just gave me a lot of confidence going into CIM because I know as a coach that if you can average 10 miles of marathon pace work kind of in that 4 to 5 week window before race day, it's all you need. And then you can start tapering and that pace is in, I shouldn't say in the bag. It's supposed to be in the bag. But when you're fueling with spring energy and running a slightly warmer race, it's not in the bag. Which is what happened for CIM for me, which is fine. So, the faster you can recover in training, obviously, the more you can get in training, the more you can do. And you just can up level a little bit faster and kind of move through the cycle a little bit easier, which is always a good thing. And hey, if you're on the other side of that coin, which I have been, I actually flipped way on the other side for my next training cycle. And you're not recovering well, that happens too. Just do everything that you can do to recover. And if you feel like you are recovering or like you're laying low, you're staying home, you're staying off your feet, you're stretching, all that kind of stuff, I would suggest looking at like your stress levels. Is your mind, are you overthinking? Are you in your head? Are you really relaxing when you're home? Or are you working? Are you stressed? Are you having conversations that are stressful? Like all that stuff does play into it and it all plays into how we recover. So that's really important to know. And I don't necessarily think we talk about that enough. We talk about training stress quite a bit. We say stress is stress, but what does that actually mean? Can really think that you're doing a great job recovering and it's still not happening because your body's in like overdrive inside, when on the outside you look like you are recovering. I'm just being a couch potato, right? Anyone else? I feel that. All right, so I want to note that I'm not a doctor and I'm not a registered dietitian. So please consult your doctor or a registered dietitian for specific advice and recommendations. I know Megan's taking new clients on. I'm sure Kelsey is as well. I'll link their Instagram accounts in the description notes on the podcast episode. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me. I appreciate you all so much. Thanks for another wonderful episode of being together. We're stronger together, and I hope this helps your summer training. Have a great week.